Hey folks, today is July the 11th. I'm running a bit late this morning. I wanted to get in here earlier so you guys could see the trade room from the beginning. It's currently about 10:30 in the morning. Trade room typically goes until about 11, I believe. But let's go ahead and see what they're up to right now. You can see here they already have a trade alert in. And I'll pull this up. Let me see. All right, so we're currently in a trade right now. They're in a long on the AUD CAD. And again, I won't be able to join the room on a daily basis, or whenever the room is open, but I'll try to get in and do videos so you guys can see it. For example, here you can see 30 pip risk, 108 pip profit target. We're definitely in an uptrend, and it looks like they took a buy trade. We're only down about 15 pips right now, but as you can see, the lot sizes that they're using have gone up. They're currently using 2.28 for the lot size. And again, I'll say it again, I'm using a 4% risk on my trades. Okay, so every time or as my account grows in size, the lot sizes are going to continue to grow as well. All right, let me go ahead and turn the mic on in here so you guys can hear what they're talking about.
Welcome to the webinar. You have entered as an attendee in listen-only mode.
In part, drive some of these currencies higher against the CAD. Obviously, we'd like to see the Aussie dollar join that a little bit more robustly. I mean, it's certainly up against the CAD. Very nice base. Just hasn't been able to make good upside yet against the CAD out of the base. So it's kind of sticking in the middle to middle top third of the base after having briefly broken out above it. So slightly underwater at the moment, but not significantly. We'll keep an eye on that. No target is issued there yet. Obviously, we will have a target if this is an idea that extends beyond 11 a.m. Eastern, and we've got about 25 minutes to go in the pip room. So obviously, if there's something else that is tradable that we like, that obviously we will issue it. However, at the moment, just the one canceled idea and the one open trade idea. Most of these, let me find some more examples here. Most of these rallies, and I talked about this earlier, made this point, these rallies, if you look at the middle of my screen, Euro, JPY, these rallies in pairs against the yen, like Euro, JPY, EUR, JPY, rally up to the potential resistance point of a 200-hour moving average, and often that's a good place to short, but when it's a first day up on the daily, first day up after a multi-day move to the downside, that's often, it's just too strong, and I don't look to short a counter trend short. I don't look to fade that kind of strength. We talked about that in detail later, so I won't elaborate on that now. However, you can see Euro JPY just plowed right through. And most of these are going to show similar results. So let's look at pound yen, see what happened there. And we see pound yen, interesting, hasn't gotten, this pound has been so weak, it hasn't even gotten up to its 200-hour moving average, which is kind of interesting. Let's look at the yen, US JPY, powered up to the 200-day hour moving average and just kept on going. The one exception, so that again, was fairly spot on. The one exception to that would be this CAD yen, which rallied up to the 200-hour moving average, and as oil weakened and the Canadian dollar weakened, this one did actually come off the 200, but that's the exception. Normally, I would want to see some sisters and brothers, some other currencies doing the same thing, and that just didn't look like to be the case. It's not the case today. This is really the exception that was able to weaken against that 200-hour moving average. Tag, in terms of macro or just longer term, maybe less traveled currency pairs, if you will, anything you are looking at this week?
Let's see, my week are walk through them. So, whatever. I still have a bias on pound US dollar, but there's nothing there right now, especially after today. For right now, anyways. CAD, I'm a big fan of. We've gone over that.
Yeah.
Euro, I'm biased to the downside. There's no current setup, but I'm heavily biased to the downside. That's probably bad, I guess. But it broke its trend line. It broke the 200-day moving average, and for a lot of fundamental reasons, I could see this going lower, and so I'm looking for setups there. There's no current setup there, though. We've talked about yen a bunch. I'm dollar yen. I'm bullish on dollar yen, but I'm bearish yen. Aussie Kiwi we talked about. I'm bullish on that. Euro CAD took off. That showed up. It was interesting looking on one of my scans.
And I stepped away. I had mentioned, I had talked about it briefly, and then I had to step away. And then I heard you start to talk about it. I miss your thoughts, but that's interesting. So in your scanning, you were also...
Yeah, so I mentioned it, a week or two ago, what have you, that I run a scan where I'm looking at the 10-day volatility relative to the 100-day volatility. So the 180 days, sorry. The 180 days is slightly more than half a year, but essentially what I'm looking at is long-term, what's the volatility on something. And when the shorter-term volatility is a lot lower or a lot higher than the average, then it's kind of telling me something. So in this case, the 10-day got to, the 10-day volatility got only 32.5% of the 180-day volatility. So that's a lot lower. That's super low vol relative to where it normally is. And, that tells me, hey, go look at things. In this case, the chart actually looked pretty decent. Not amazing, but decent. Another one that had a low vol was CAD SEK, and that chart didn't look appealing to me at all. But, it does say, hey, this is kind of an extreme case. Go take a look at it. In that case, the chart looked interesting, but it took off like crazy today without much of an which is the frustrating part. Because the daily's all right looking. It's not like amazing, but it's not bad. And then the intraday, it just took off. There's no great setup or anything, which is frustrating. So I don't know. For this week, that's mainly what I have on my list. There are a bunch of other things that kind of alerted me. I mean, with all the pound and the yen moves, we have a lot of overbought markets.
That's right.
Another thing
and very quickly into the week, which is always interesting. Yeah.
But so that's one thing I look at is it's just regular 14-day, the default setting on most platforms. But I look regularly at everything that's overbought, oversold by that metric. So again, overbought, oversold by itself doesn't mean too much. At the extremes though, sometimes I find some really interesting setups. So I just I run that scan to tell me, hey, go look at these. It doesn't mean there's a thing there. Because obviously, if it's in an uptrend, what are you going to find? In a nice, strong uptrend, you're going to find that it's consistently saying it's overbought, and yet it remains overbought. On the downside, when a long-term downtrend, it says it's oversold. Funny, it gets more and more oversold. That said, sometimes that's not the case, right? Sometimes you'll have a big pop into something, and maybe there's some really good resistance or support at an overbought, oversold level, so there can be some interesting things. So I just look at them because, it tells me some extreme examples. So I have that set, and that tells me things. One thing that was interesting, actually, for my weekend work is that my volatility measures, so I run this on all the G10 pairs, which gives me 45 pairs that you can look at, right? So it's a pretty good cross-sectional view of a lot of different pairs, right? In major currencies. And last week, thanks to Brexit, I can't remember the number offhand. I could go pull it up. But roughly speaking, 70% plus of the pairs were all showing volatility that was over 150%. In most cases, it was 200% and 300% of the longer-term volatility measures. So very, very volatile. It was across almost everything. What was interesting there was one thing that was, and we've mentioned this a few times, is Aussie Kiwi wasn't. Aussie Kiwi actually was the only one that came in at below 50% of the historical vol level. So it came in super low vol. At the same time, everything else was crazy. But those have all gone away now, so now everything's pretty much in a normal area, except for, like I said, EuroCAD and then CAD, SEK. And so everything else is closer. They're all like in the 75 to 110%, 120% ranges, which is really pretty normal. But yeah, I mean.
All right, folks, we just hit the 10-minute mark. It is currently 10:45. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause it, and then I'm going to come back so that we can see the ending of this session. So I'll be back in about 10 minutes or so we can catch the end. All right, folks, they've just updated everything in the trade room. They're adding a target now for that trade. You can see it's 10:54 right now.
If you're new to the room, today was actually, we for sure had some new people in here today, a fair amount of new people. We have some new people every day, I guess, but today, the last week must have been pretty good. Asking about how many trades we normally have. So a typical day is 1 to 3. We've had more, and we've had a couple, it's rare, but we've had a couple 0 days where nothing triggered. And what can we expect in the future? Well, on average, probably 1 to 3, right? Occasionally it's going to be more, occasionally it's going to be a 0, but typically we have a few. But it really depends on what the market gives up. We don't click for the sake of clicking. We click to try to make money. So again, I don't know if we're picky or not picky. We're selective at some level because again, you're not trying to find action just to get involved in action. If you're into that, go to the track, go to Vegas, what have you. There's plenty of action for the sake of action there. If you're trying to look for action that has a high probability of being profitable, that's going to self-select about 90+% of charts you look at out of the equation. And, so then you have to find the things that trigger as well. So a typical day in the NY PIP room, in the room that we're managing, we're going to typically, it's 1 to 3 is really regular. Occasionally it's higher. And then occasionally we've had 2 or 3 or 4 days, and this is like in 6 months where it was 0, right? So it's rare, but it happens. And it'll happen again one day type thing. But we typically have a few trades. So if you need 30 trades in a 3-hour session, just go in the corner and start clicking your button. Good luck with that. We're pretty selective, and it doesn't mean every time we pick something it's going to work out, but on average it's worked out really, really well. So that's what you can expect in here for the most part.
I updated trade alert number 2, which is obviously the open trade idea here, ADCAD, and that now has the target listed there, 0.9945. as per what I put in the chat room. So that is 53 pips-ish, okay? And that is, again, issued there, or updated rather, in that Excel sheet.
Yeah, so everything's updated. Make sure, if you're trying to follow this trade, then make sure you write those things down. Because obviously, in a few minutes we close a session and then it's gone. So again, it's the end of the session, so we're showing you there where the updated stop is and where the target is. Because again, while we're in the room, we like using the discretion for the target. But when you're leaving, you kind of need to have a fixed target price.
Exactly. What was I going to add to that? I was going to bring up that chart. Why don't I bring up that chart tag? Okay. And is this EuroCAD or is this different?
Yeah, that one's EuroCAD.
All right, great.
Yeah, and this chart that he's bringing up, it shows, so it's
nice.
Just the ratio. I guess this one's not the ratio. I labeled that wrong. Oh, well. Now, this is showing you the 2 different volatility measures, right? So the 180 day, it's a lot, the red line, that's a lot slower moving because it's looking at 180 days. And so it's just, and it's going to be slower by nature, right? It's kind of just the trend of it. And you can see, for a long time it's been trending up. It's now trending down a little bit, what have you. But the bigger point is to see the 10-day, the shorter term measure. It's pretty cyclical, huh? It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. Long-term long-term anything doesn't move as fast, just, by nature of it being called long-term. But the 10-day, so when it's really low, I like looking at it as, hey, this is a potential area for a good chart pattern to buy or sell, right? Because again, a low vol, well, then if it goes to high vol, that means it broke out or broke down pretty hard. There's rare exceptions, obviously, where it just chops like crazy with big choppiness, but that's really rare. So typically with low vol, that's what I'm looking for. With high vol, sometimes you'll find an interesting setup that'll move pretty fast in the other direction, though on average that's more of an option selling thing for me than anything. But I really love super low vol situations for potential entry points.
So look, folks, at the difference between this, and remember the idea is this was only prior to today, this was only a third. It's kind of a sophisticated concept, but once you get it, hopefully you grasp it. So this was relatively quiet recently, right? The past couple of weeks, kind of narrow, this pair, as we saw on the chart. However, historically, it's not usually that quiet. And so if you look at the blue line, the lower right-hand corner, you see very low short-term volatility. The blue is represents 10 days. You can see it's much more volatile, right? Shorter periods of time, you'll see more variance, whereas it's smoother over the longer term. But you do see it, obviously, the volatility will change depending on the period for the market, the year, and so on. So very low volatility in the short term, and however much higher normal volatility. So the greater the gap between this red line and this blue line, the more the rubber band potentially is stretched between the normal and what's happening in the short term. Obviously, you see it the other way too, right? And this is maybe even better rubber band analogy, where the short-term volatility is so high, as you see here in the late summer of or early fall of last year. Short-term volatility was way higher than the long-term average, and boom, reverted back. Boom, reverted back here in another part of 2015. So you do see kind of that stretched effect. Sometimes short-term volatility is way high and much above the average. Sometimes it's the opposite, like we just saw. And so you can see, and it's a very nice chart, thanks, Tag. You can see, there where we might be. Are we really quiet, well below the historical volatility? Well, we might see that pair wake up. Maybe it's an up move, maybe it's a down move. We don't know. But the chart often can give some indication of which way we might want to look for that. So it's a very handy tool, and I'm sure we'll see that again as well. That's something I should consider for the dashboards. And the dashboards, if you're unfamiliar with the dashboards, we're talking about, I do not have one made yet. It would take me not that long, but it would be a distraction. It would take me probably about 10 minutes to get Aussie CAD here up in such a format. This is Aussie US dollar, but just characteristics from 2008 to the present, or at least through July 1st. And some of the characteristics like volatility, what's the annualized volatility, more easy to grasp things like what's the best day ever in that time period, worst day ever. You can see plus 8.6%, best day, worst day, a little bit less than that. Correlation to various things like S&P 500, 61% correlation. Or against the US dollar, or correlation to the US dollar, you can see it's negative correlation. So that is something that you'll see a bit more of as the rest of these get built out. Another piece of that is just more correlations. I'll make that a little bit easier to see. So this again is AUD USD, not the open trade idea AUD CAD, but just to give you an idea, various correlations to commonly traded currency pairs. And the way you know that we're looking at AUD USD would be what? Is there a 100% correlation somewhere in here? And the answer is yes. AUD USD, 100% correlation just means that it looked at all the AUD USD data in linear fashion, meaning in the sequence of time, and compared it to the same exact data. And guess what? They're 100% the same. They're 100% correlated. So that's how you know that the data used here is AUD USD. But for all the others, obviously you have different data.
And
And you can see
how's that super useful though? So if you're long or short AUD USD, well, if you go put on AUD JPY in the same direction, guess what? They're almost the same trade. Look at that. One's obviously one's 100%. The other one's 83.44% of that other trade, right? And so you're essentially putting on two of the same position because they basically move completely. Not completely, but almost completely in lockstep. Now, if it was 0%, hey, maybe it's something. Maybe there's another trade, even though it has the same pair, one of the same pairs in it. Though that's going to be super rare, but theoretically it could happen. But when you're putting on something that has 70, 80, 90% of the other trade, you're just doubling your position size. You're telling yourself, I'm diversifying, I have a different position on, but you're wrong and or lying to yourself. Don't worry, we all do it, but it's something you don't want to be doing, right? Lying to yourself probably isn't a good thing. And so you're just doubling your position size or tripling your position size, as the case may be. And so that's one of the many ways these stats can be really useful.
Yeah, exactly. And while we don't have AUD CAD up here as the basis for all these correlations, you can see there was a moment where we had AUD CHF and AUD CAD both as ideas. We quickly canceled AUD CHF. It was just breaking down. But you can see both are very almost similar correlation or almost the same correlation to the AUD USD. So you can just infer from that they're going to be very closely correlated, most likely themselves. So at any rate, that was why we didn't maintain having both of those. So we're about 5 minutes over. Thanks for hanging in extra with us. We appreciate it and hope you learned something today. In terms of the open trade, we've got AUD CAD open. The details are in the chat. They're also up here. There was a target price issued, so there is a target price now. And this is above its stop. We'll hope that it doesn't stop out. If it does come down to 0.9860 or lower, excuse me, it will close out for a loss somewhere in this area of risk of maybe 32-ish pips, maybe a little bit greater loss. If it can improve and move back above the entry and ideally to our stop, to our target or above, then that gain will be somewhere roughly around 50 pips, maybe 53. Just depends on one's broker, one's fills, and so on. So we'll see what happens. There may be an update. I said that on screen here. If it remains, and in the chat, if it remains open post NY Pipram, which it certainly looks like it will before we close this in several seconds, there may be a potential update. Not definitely, but there may be an update. So if you see a trade alert come into the app and in the subject it says NY Pipram trade update or something like that, it will reference NY Pipram. Then please pay attention to that if you are interested in this trade idea. Okay. Tag, thanks very much, folks. Look forward to Wednesday. Interesting week getting going here with this yen weakness and a little pound activity.
All right, guys, they're about to shut down the room, but it looks like they entered that trade at 9892, and I just wanted to see what my entry was on that. All right, so 9893, so not too much of a difference there. And what we're going to do now is basically I'm going to let this recording continue to go. As I've said before, this is trading. There is risk. We're going to have losers. We're going to have winners. So we're just going to let this play out, watch it, and see what happens here. They did lower the profit target, mainly because they're closing out the room, so they wanted to get something in there. It's about 50 pips away. All right, so we'll continue watching these two trades. We're waiting on this one to push down here. And we're waiting on this one to push up back to the entry level here. All right, so I'll watch it, and I'll come back to you guys hopefully around 12 o'clock to give you an update, and we'll see what happens. All right, be back momentarily. All right, folks, it's a little after 12. I wanted to give you guys an update on the progress here. As you can see, NZD USD is right around break even now. And AUD CAD, we are about, I'm going to say about 10 pips away from the break-even mark. So we're going to continue watching this. One of the things I or one of the reasons I like the FX Simplifier is because I don't have to, watch trades myself. I know the professionals are doing it. So again, I want to make this clear. I'm not going to be doing this every day. I might try to do it maybe once a week, just so you guys can get a feel for how things work in the trade room, and so you can actually see how they manage, some of the trades that they have open. All right, so this was a 12 o'clock update. I'll come back again at 1 o'clock, and we'll see what the trades are doing at that point. All right, folks, another quick update here. You can see we're on AUD CAD right now. We're currently about 8 or 9 pips away from our entry price. So the market has just been stuttering around this level here, so we'll continue watching it. Hopefully it'll go our way shortly. Let's check on NZD USD. Same situation. All right, actually it looks like we just pushed into profit here with the NZD USD, so that's a good sign. All right, let's continue watching it. And instead of coming back every hour, say at 2 o'clock, I might just come back about 7 o'clock this afternoon if they're still open. That's when I should be getting back in the house. So I'm going to try to keep this under 30 minutes. All right, I'll come back with you guys a little bit later. All right, folks, it's now 7:38 in the afternoon. I'm going to come back and let you guys see what's been going on here. As you can see, the AUD CAD trade here still haven't been able to break this level. On one hand, that tells me that the market is able to break that. We're most likely going to have a strong push up. There's a high probability that that's going to happen if we break this level. And back here, you guys can see we're still right around the break-even level. This is our entry, and that's where the market actually is. So we're about 3 or 4 pips away. So the market really hasn't done too much of anything for pretty much the whole day. We're still right around the break-even level. We're about 7 pips away on the AUD CAD trade. I'll let this run overnight, and I'll try to put this video out tomorrow morning for 10 o'clock, one or the other. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. I'll try to keep this in 30 minutes. All right, see you guys tomorrow.